Canon EF 50mm f1.4. Is this super fast 50 a must-have for video? The Canon EF 50mm 1.4 comes in at around £350 to £400 when new. We were lucky enough to pick this one up used from the guys at London Camera Exchange for just £200. And at that price point, this represents a huge amount of lens for your money. It's one of Canon's full-frame prime lenses, so no zoom here. But despite being designed for Canon's full-frame cameras, this will also work on any APS-C size DSLR or adapted mirrorless camera. Now that 1.6 times crop that you get with an APS-C size sensor will turn the 50mm into an 80mm focal length. Now, despite being a 50mm focal length, you do still get quite a wide 40-degree field of view. So that means it's a wide enough shot for any closer portraits, interviews, or talking head style shots. Now sure, it's not as wide as you'd come to expect with something like a 16 to 35, but it's certainly wide enough for pretty much most talking head video shots. Now the lens has a minimum focus distance of 45 centimeters, and it makes use of Canon's USM autofocus motor. It also has a really lovely designed manual focus ring, which has a really long 200-degree throw, so it's almost perfect for manual focusing video work. It's a very long, precise focus ring, which helps you get super sharp images every time. This lens has a maximum aperture of f1.4, and really that's the key selling point from it and why it's so much more expensive than its little brother, the f1.8. The f1.4's wide aperture allows in around 60% more light than its little brother, which obviously has huge benefits for video, especially in low light situations. It also has added benefits to the general aesthetic of your video and the image quality you're likely to render from it. And all that leads us nicely to looking at the good bits of the Canon 50mm f1.4. Now the first great bit about this lens is the speed and that super wide f1.4 maximum aperture, which makes this lens incredible in low light situations. Now great low light performance is a facet we only normally see with very expensive full frame cameras, but the fact that this works at f1.4 and will fit cheaper DSLRs means the world of great low light performance is now available on cheaper DSLRs such as the Canon 80D. So to consider that the f1.4 lets in around 60% more light than the much cheaper f1.8 makes this an incredible alternative. And that leads us on nicely to the second great feature of this lens, which is also how fast it is. When wide open at f1.4, you get absolutely beautiful bokeh, the kind of aesthetic that you normally associate with your favourite YouTubers, and that fantastic B-roll that they get is now open to you. Now, beautifully circular bokeh and great separation from the background, that depth of field aesthetic that you're used to seeing is only normally available to full frame cameras. So much like low light performance, we're only used to seeing that kind of aesthetic on multiple £1,000 cameras, but it's now available to anyone that uses any cheaper DSLRs that have an APS-C size sensor or any adapted mirrorless cameras in the Canon range. You can now get that beautiful aesthetic that you've been looking for. Now being a super fast prime 50mm, this lens really comes into its own when you're filming people. For any portrait work, talking heads, or just general talking to camera, this lens really is at its best. Now being an f1.4, as we've said, it's great in low light performance and great at bokeh, but also with portrait work or talking heads, it really separates the subject from the background in an incredible way. It does take a little bit of work, a little bit of heavy lifting to get the perfect shot, but if you've got time to set up with this lens, it's really hard to beat the image quality that it will give you for any talking head work. Now with all that said, let's look at the bad bits of the Canon EF 50mm f1.4. The build quality, it's the first thing you're going to notice of any bit of equipment when you unbox it, and it does let down the EF 51.4 slightly. It is an all plastic construction and feels slightly cheap in hand. It certainly doesn't represent that price point that it sits at. That being said, there are some nice points to the build quality. The front element is really quite deeply recessed into the body, so no need for any cheap nasty UV filters to protect your front glass. And also the focus ring is actually quite nicely designed. It's got a really nice travel to it and enables manual focus in video really well. Next up is the versatility of this lens, and it is certainly far from a versatile lens. If you're looking for something to strap onto your camera and use all day and forget about it, well, then don't look at this lens. It doesn't have the width of something like a 16 to 35, and doesn't have the versatility of a zoom like that lens does. But what this lens does well, it does incredibly well. Like I said previously, if you've got time to set up a shot, perhaps lock it off on a tripod, be it for an interview, a talking head, or something like this shot here, then this lens is really hard to beat. But if you're looking for something that offers a huge amount of versatility, like the 16-35, then you should steer clear of the 50-1.4. And the final 2 points to bear in mind is the fact that this lens has no inbuilt image stabilization, and it uses the quite loud USM autofocus motor. So if you're thinking of using this 50mm for vlogging, make sure your camera body has some kind of image stabilization built in. And also with that in mind, make sure you're using some kind of external microphone, because the USM autofocus motor will get picked up in your shots. It's not a huge deal, but it's definitely worth bearing in mind if you're looking at buying this lens. So in summary, this lens does have some shortcomings, but to be fair, no lens is perfect in every situation. What this does do though, is give you the option of a super fast 50mm prime lens that is fantastic for interviews, for talking heads, or for any locked off shot. At this price point, especially on the used market, it's going to be incredibly hard to beat. So if you'd like to know more about this lens, there's some links below. And whilst you're down there, consider subscribing to our channel or even joining our Filmmakers Club, where you get monthly access to assets to help you on your filmmaking journey. That's been my grab and go review of the Canon EF 50mm f1.4. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.